the C2 of XILONEN, and not only the C2 but the cone, the gun. He threw over Kiori's gun, and I got XILONEN's gun. What do I do if you say you don't recommend it so much, Phil? XILONEN to Chero. All options that already go only beyond the Chero. But as I say, the cone. The C2, the weapon, which can become worthwhile since with the change in the divine path, the weapon is more compared to the cone. Of course the C2, and especially the equipment where that C2 not only gives us new general damage ceilings, but new damage ceilings in the game. It will enable us between 3 and 5 best in slot teams, ranking the table of best teams in the game, with which definitely and not only to Chero, because you've already seen the team build, but C2 literally gives a new roof to the game. So leave a good like, a good Bennett ulti subscribe, leave a good comment for the algorithm. Thank you for enjoying and watching the channel video. And as I always say, this is that moment when I tell you it doesn't cost you nothing, it's free. So please, I'll put you there. Let's go give it like and subscribe to bell. Thank you for doing it, how great you are. Thank you really people, and welcome guests to the live ones. Let's go with the C2 and the cone and the weapon. Let's start with the cone and weapon because for everyone, let's say it's the closest and the most realistic thing. Here to keep in mind that I have already released the C2 in the free-to-play account, as given me. I got lucky, I got a Mona on pity 40, but then a XILONEN on pity 20, and I won a 50-50 with 200 of those about that I could pull out XILONEN C2 on the free-to-play and now save for Mavwika that I think maybe I'm going to lose it. But this is already a novel you're going to see in the live shows to see if I lose it or not lose it, Mavwika. But this XILONEN C2 I have personally for you to know within the contexts of my accounts that we are testing. Well, the cone or the gun, personally I don't think cone and the gun are that important, and I wouldn't recommend them at all. Now I explain why, but of course for whoever has the gun, take advantage of it, and it is also widespread in the community about who's got the gun or who's got the defense to say things about the charging clock. Now I explain all this and we narrow it down well, and what is my point of view, but also because this can serve perfectly. Cone? Cone, I would rule it out basically because if it's true that it gives you a, say, quality of life, let's call it quality of life, more to the cone so that you literally have more time to scan mode, skate mode, the mount mode, and then you resist the interruption to the character and field that we're not going to lie to is interesting. Is useful, basically gives resistance interrupt the character and field so that many enemies interrupt the chain of the chain. That's the character's combo is interesting, but I think that cone is really very unhelpful compared to the rest of things that the character can do both to Chero and C2 and compared to other cone of the game, and for me, the cone basically. It is a transition to the C2 with which the cone and only as a concept of shooting by the cone would not recommend it. Now, the weapon. The weapon, as we already commented, gives us 82% defense in substats, and the passive gives to all the equipment that is important 25% basic damage bonus. If you get to have 3,200 defense in XILONEN, that with 82% of the defense weapon. If you go to reach the XILONEN itself, the other 20% of elemental damage that is to complement XILONEN for whom he wants to play it for carry because they kind of have done what they do many times, not as good as Chero, as imbued with Geo and Teo. You give a few basics, just the same can be a little carry that then it's not really carry, and it doesn't do anything right from carry unless 6 is not done, but for many people who want to try it because, well, there is the option and there are people who still play things very. I do it for fun and it's okay as an alternative then if we put a cone that really gives you a, let's say, minimally useful thing is the interrupt resistance to the character and field or the weapon that are equivalent to the new divine path that gives us 25% of bonus elemental damage to the team, and specifically the weapon compares it with the Favonius. That the Favonius does not only give all the recharge you want XILONEN to carry it, triple defense and cover you a lot, but it also gives particles to the team so that the whole team has per multi thing that usually people. I don't usually have per multi on the equipment and I don't know how well to balance what energy really is, as I'd say directly. You go for XILONEN Chero, and my most sincere advice is that neither weapon nor cone with Chero is okay, and that you save because although the 5.2, we can all see that good Chaska good is a Carionemos escaramach with steroids, we can Skype and save by when. You'll get Mawika and maybe you'll want C2 and Arcanter gun or only C2, or maybe the cone is very hot too. You'll regret it. If I hadn't thought that, after taking out XILONEN Chero, someone would have recommended you to save. Please really save, because that cone and that gun aren't really as strong or as important as anything that can come to NATLAN unless that Ultra Mega Super Whales then are interesting, but are relatively bad compared to other character weapons. 5 stars or with another 5-star cone to finish. And we talked about the C2, the theme of carrying your weapon and watch, of red charge and things like that. Really, XILONEN, remember that it costs 60, which is very low. That is why the character is so strong. And not only that, but NATLAN said as explained in his guide, and here I quote it again because it has to do with the gun. It makes you that every time you jump a Noctambulo burst is passive out of the field, you're going to regenerate 6 of energy the character. That has the XILONEN set, and if it has no other talent of ascension that gives you another burden of the nightly burst, is to say 2 loads. 6D, 12, 60 minus 12, 48. Cost is one of the base costs of a lower character in the game. There are characters like Shy and June, or as Diluc, they also have 40 cost. That is amazing, but XILONEN is so powerful and is a support on a carry that cost of 48 is crazy, and why I explained this cost of recharging energy, because really it, with just 150 recharging, has premium ulti, and 150 is achieved in its stats with 2 items of 15% and other 2 items of 10% recharge, and not to be lost. A defense clock, because what you prefer is to invest in defense to have overheating to activate Furina charges specifically, or to directly insert 2 7,000 ticks into the characters and let everyone be full of life after XILONEN's ulting. So it's really worth this kind of thing. And that's why the issue of carrying your Favonius weapon and so on, because I'm really following. Commenting on how in the build, and I think it's more worth it. And in fact, for people who have few resources, it's easier to look. Triple defense and recharge on your stats, and if you go Favonius, because the helmet of probability equals you're going to have overheating, a lot of defense. Zab, stat a lot of recharge, or with Favonius, don't look for recharge and just look for defense and probability and become more. Simple, but ultimately for new accounts that do not have the Favonius, because if there is no alternative, if you can carry as an alternative, the helmet good, the helmet defense, the clock recharge, and carry the weapon of the forge if you have not even his weapon. Not a free Favonius for XILONEN, but by default. And if you get the chance, the other alternatives are better. C2, now it's the C2. It's very hot, or it's not very hot, because if it's basically the C2, you know that the character's Pyro of the team is going to put 45% of attack, mainly because Hu Tao is not so important to Alekino, that it is ultra important, because not only buffa the skill damage base, but Alekino turns the attack into damage normal attacks and gives more damage to normal attacks than its main source of damage to XILONEN in international teams, or Babe. For Mayat or international Tartaglia gives 45% more attack to XILONEN, and is powerful that Bufo yes to the Cryos gives 60 damage. Cryocritic. This is not so important, but in teams of Ayaka or Ivesli may not come bad, and a Ryovsli, let's say hypercarry, with Ijiang Kazuha XILONEN similar to Nervilet Furina, because it might not be bad at all, but Ryovsli doesn't have such a climb. Powerful like those who have Nervilet, but 60% critic raise Ryovsli if you take advantage of it with an attack helmet, and you need he. An attack helmet once you over the critical damage by this C2. From XILONEN can also give you a very interesting route from Ryovsli for whoever plays Ryovsli. So here I mention Orifice, that strange team from Ryovsli per carry the XILONEN Chero without Noivilet Furina Kasuha is already one of the ceilings of the game, with the C2 of XILONEN that will give you 45% of life. And now we get into the topic of the Hydro Bufo that gives you the C2 to 45% of life if it's going to give you the best team of the game. Noivilet Furina. If it is C2 more still Kazuha XILONEN. C2 today is the best team of the game, is thus friends and the C2U. Enable it but close this theme, or not closing, but by doing a parenthesis on this theme to finish the rest of buffos. 50% geo damage bonus plus CT2, that tells you that the geo disc will always be active to lower resistances geo does. That XILONEN C2 again is the highest roof of Navia, and the highest roof of Ito. Much you have told me, Phil speaks of. XILONEN's teams in the previous video, but in this video we talked about the C2, if XILONEN with C2 on the teams. Ito gives you the loss of geo resistances by the C2 that always has the geodisc active 50% year bonus inflicted on Thea. Geos by the C2 that is the passive of the C2 itself, and moreover by making a crystallized geo activates 40% of the damage geo with the Zetai XILONEN CT2 Goruchi Neat. Ito is the best in slot of the Geo teams and the last character, since you can take the Zhongli for the Immortal Shield and then to take there a Geo team, removing Albedo, putting XILONEN C2, and you have the new best in slot new roof of the equipments of Ito. And instead of Zhongli, you could carry, for example, a Kuki for the heating and down, for electro pulses for crystallized ones, because if you put a Zhongli and the enemy is not affected by any element. But there are enemies that have applied elements own XILONEN does not make a crystallization, so it does not activate the set with act. Which is the Geo block or Geo porn that use calls it if it starts and fucking Paul, which is the 4 Geos with XILONEN technically. It's very bad because you don't activate a crystallized, then the last character among XILONEN Goro Ito must be a character of another element that activates you. Crystallized mainly would be very good if it were an official, but you have to play very well. That's because it depends only on Goro C4's heating, that's poor, but XILONEN C2 too. Absolute Roof of Navia. Absolute Roof of Ito for the men Geo XILONEN revive the Geo. Another of the buffos that you can give us, I hope you don't forget any of them, is the Electro buffo mainly is for 2 equipments, and the absolute ceiling is in one of them. One of the equipment with this C2 for the Electros can therefore be 4 Chlorinde or Keiching teams, as I explained the aggravation teams, but Chlorinde and Keiching already have 15 seconds of cooldown. And let's cut you down to 6 seconds of cooldown or give 25 of energy to these characters. You don't care, because at least you keep staying. You benefit from reducing cooldown seconds or giving Keiching energy that has cost a 40 in the ulti and its C2 above. Generates more. Particles is actually the bonus electro of the C2 of XILONEN, is mainly for Sino and Raiden where we can. Give absolute roof with Raiden, because not with Sino, because the bonus that gives the electro does not harm you, only regenerates you 25% of energy, and it reduces 6 points in the cooldown, which is how it affects the team of Sino, the team that I explained where XILONEN can do. Baiju's work is in quotation marks a lot, and in the team video I explained all the variants and how it compares with Baiju, whether or not he wears Dragon Hunter, or if he doesn't give him more energy and heals more for Furina's loads. Well, that's in the video. I recommend you go to see the part of Sino that interests you, but the summary is how it reduces cooldown to Sino. Team XILONEN 15 seconds, Furina 15 seconds, Nagia 15 seconds, Sino has 20, but with XILONEN C2 also happens to have 20 minus 6, 14 turns the Sino team into a rotation team of 15. Same damage in 15 seconds of rotation is interesting. It's interesting to give you a new roof of Sino. Good Baiju has 20 seconds, and the Baiju Cone Dragon Hunter for energy, extra heating, extra bonus to reactions within general, and the Dragon Hunter for Sino more or less leaves you some more similar ceilings, but it is a good alternative. The absolute roof is the Raiden Hypercarry that the same Raiden Hypercarry passes of rotation of 20 seconds that Sarah has to rotation of 15 seconds with practically the same damage because the ceiling in spite. Team damage begins with Raiden's cut, which is a giant burst and then decays because Kazuha will be lost first. The Bufo of the bonus elemental damage, because Kazuha, you know he has only 8 seconds, makes the Bennett XILONEN. C2 Sarah Raiden Us gives a new roof of the Raiden Hypercarry with the disadvantage of not being able to put together. And here, XILONEN, even as everyone has a lot of energy because Raiden is a battery, and because Raiden more Sarah with electric sonance generates particles to XILONEN. You can put the Shifos and the Shifos in XILONEN, makes you buff it to Raiden, and that's going to give him more damage than new roof. To enter the Bufo into life, because that's where it really also gives us new absolute ceilings. Let's talk about Yelen's Furina of Novila Tech. I've already mentioned it. And of Moalani again, Hutao with XILONEN C2 receives a new absolute roof because Fizzler editors already had a circuit control and a collapse. I don't know if you leave this for people to laugh. Let's position ourselves in the B. Wu Tao team that I commented on the base that we're comparing with XILONEN in the computer video. That computer basically is Hu Tao Furina Yelan Xianyong, which is the current roof with Xianyong Dragon Hunter and Double Bonanyo and Fulingzhio Yelan. And Furina XILONEN Achero does not improve against a single enemy that team, but does improve against several enemies. But Hu Tao is very unitary, and you have complicated to put a vaporized load and above against the enemies that are positioned in row well. XILONEN's C2 gives us a new absolute roof of Hu Tao because it's going to give 45% of life to Fiorina Yelan. They're going to make an insane damage, and also that 45% to Hu Tao attack, because it is not bad, but Hu Tao know that he has a very low base attack. The truth doesn't take advantage of it so much, but something is something that it gives us an absolute new roof and a brutal new damage against A and several enemies alone in C2 Fu, Fiorina Yelan Hu Tao, and here again a honorific mention is that Alkino on that team does not. Is that it has a new absolute roof because it continues to roof with the Arlecchino Fiorina C2 Kazuha, C2-2 with the Bennett Masterius, to say it is not a new absolute ceiling of Arlecchino, but in this equipment that is the new roof of Hu Tao Arlecchino is better Zay Arlecchino Fiorina Yelan XILONEN, CT2 Since Arlecchino takes more advantage of this attack, Bufo is also a team that would improve. That same team of Hu Tao and would be the second best team of Arlecchino in the game today. And finally, since we have talked about Neuvillette, Mualani not only earns that 45% of additional life, but also the XILONEN buffo space. Plus for XILONEN's passive wins one more Burj Nightwalker charge to do this thing I did in the Abyss with Mualani Chero. I think you've seen in previous videos, but here you're enjoying 900,000 of a bite and a million. 200,000 bill of the ulti in Abyss. This is another damn level because, well, the new absolute roof, of course, of Mualani. And Mualani, at the expense of still being able to play with Mavuika, is to say that he has more improvement, still gives us a new absolute roof. Of the Mualani team is literally saying that I believe that there are at least 3 new teams that could enter the top 5, 6, top 7, even opening a lot, the limit of best teams in the game thanks to XILONEN, so it is powerful to make XILONEN if it is there are people, because as always, we always say something that attracts people's attention, wants to have, say, an opinion about it, and that generates interaction in the community on the internet, and so on, because there are people saying no is so good because I don't know, to generate a little more interaction, because obviously it's broken. It's very broken if it isn't. A character that at Chero is already Jesus Christ, that's his C2 is good. Or it's bad being base character how good it is, and C2 also being good, that C2 again, as if not for me, and I told you, recently is one of the best 2 characters of the game next to Fiorina, but the top one, the C2 along with the C2 of Fiorina and Nahida for the descent of defenses. But limited only to equipment inside with Electro seem to me to top 3 or up to top 2 best C2 of all Genshin Impact, so quiet with the protogemas because Mavuika arrives is only an opinion of the constellation. But it is not a strip indeed. Saving my advice is not strip is saving, but knowing that you have a C2 that today will enable best computers is. In slot and variants, that is beta variant that will enable you for certain computers, and not only that, but as I said at the beginning, the video is going to weave in the game will enable us new semi-realistic damage ceilings between Camillo inside the game. So little more, this is once the cone of the gun, and the C2 take care to have very good day. Do not get me children and Chaito.